say, I come to hear you. No, I just come to hear God and let God have. We'll take it one day at a time right now. Lord, for no, Lord willing, tomorrow night be the last night. But if you live around here in this community, I want you to invite somebody to come with you. Amen. Tomorrow night, call somebody. You go out here if you got a neighbor, just invite them to come on down here to this old-fashioned tent. Amen. Get under and hear the gospel be preached. And I'll tell you what, Tuesday night I had a glorious time. God just moved in here and had one of those uplifting services. He just met with us. We just got water for our soul. Amen. I'm looking for that again tonight. Just looking for somebody to get saved. I believe somebody's going to get saved from our men over here on this side. Let's just touch heaven tonight. Pray. Well, Brother Trent Cannon, if you would lead us to the Lord in prayer. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you tonight, O Heavenly Father, God, my Lord, for this service. We thank you, O Father, tonight that you give us this opportunity, dear Lord. God, we thank you for the King. Father, we come to you, God. We know that God is Lord is not in the know. It's not a God who is here, who's not here, but God, I pray Heavenly Father, this place. I pray Heavenly Father, Lord, this sinner, Lord, that God, we give gospel, and God,
Car.
Well, I tell you, our father died when we were real small. We were all born in Carroll County, and there were 6 boys and 2 girls. And our dad died. And our grandparents, my mother's family, moved us to Hogansville. And my mother went to work in the mill there, and my two older brothers, which was 16 and 14. And that's how we made it. And they were, in those days, they didn't have child labor, you know, and they worked. And
start again.
George, can I stop us for just 1 second here? I need to make.
well, my father died when we were all real young, and we lived on a farm. And then we lived in another county, Carroll County, and they, our grandparents moved us to Hogansville, the whole kit and caboodle. And my mother and two older brothers went to work, and they worked there for, I would say they were 14 and 16. And they worked there, and 6 years later my mother remarried. And so they, you know, we just all grew up there. And my stepfather, his job was putting machinery in textile. You know, he'd go from mill to mill, textile place to another. And we moved up in the Carolinas, and we moved around a lot. And finally we moved back to Eatonton, Georgia, and lived there. And wasn't no union or anything like that there then. And so that was this, and the family just got scattered away, you know. And so we moved to Noonan, East Noonan. And my stepdad helped put machinery down here. And so my sister and I got married here, two fellas from here. And that's why we were in East Noonan, and we lived there. We married in 30, and then we worked in the mill there, my husband and me. And then we had a daughter in 31. And we lived there till the union started, you know. And then that was rough times. And so I never knew any of the union officials. It was such a secret. And meeting in different places, they didn't have a meeting place, really. And my husband went, you know, he went to the meetings, and well, he hadn't been going. Well, they wasn't organizing at all. It was just talked around, and he carried out literature around. So before they even got into the striking and everything, they fired my husband. And so they, I was working, but they fired him, and they didn't fire me right away. And he went. Then I had to move because we lived on the village, which was one of the rules of the company. And we moved to Montgomery, Alabama. No, first we moved down to his uncle's in Troup County, which is the next county over here. I'm pushing up my glasses. And so...
Well, let's go back and start talking about why your husband joined the union. What kind of person was he?
My husband, he just knew it would help people. He knew it would help us to have a better living and better living environments and everything. And it would have everybody. But they just wouldn't have it. And I don't know, I couldn't name how many people were in that group. And I never knew any of the officials. But I knew when my husband came home, about the third or fourth meeting, they did it, I think, about twice a week or something like that. And I knew when he told me who was there that night, I said, well, you just watch, you'll be the first one to go. And I knew he would. And he actually was the first man to go. And then, you know, you just have to move, and that's
Now go back and tell that again, and tell why, when you knew that guy was there, that they'd have to go. So start off to saying, when my husband started going to the meetings.
Mm-hmm. Well, when he started going to the meetings, and they were, I'd say 15 or 20. I don't know if there's that many. I never went to any of the meetings because I would have gone, but he just didn't want me to get into it because he knew what it was leading up to. And so he was the first man to go. And he came home and I said, who all was there? And he named off some. I can hardly remember who was there other than this particular fellow. And I said, you know you're going to be going. You'll be the first to go. And he was. They fired him. They didn't tell him. They didn't give him any that they were firing him on account of the union. But we knew that's what it was. And this fellow worked on there, though, all those years. Died down there. But everybody knew it. He told, excuse me, he told on anybody, everybody. And there was a lot more that now that were there and worked all the time. They were sympathizers, but they absolutely wouldn't, they still there. They didn't fire them. I don't know. They just fired my husband and a few more.
What do you call those people who reported?
You don't know what I'd call them, but they were, what did they call them? I don't know. I can't remember.
The other night you said something like snitches.
They had a name. I'll think of it in a minute.
Okay.
And so, other than that,
Well, tell about after your husband got fired, what happened to you?
well, they told me, my husband, we knew we was going to have to move, and if we just sat there, they would have evicted us. They'd have set us out on the street, and we had a 3-year-old daughter. And we didn't want that to happen. Wasn't going to have it to happen. And so we moved him, as I told you, down, and his uncle was a bootlegger. And they run, you know, my husband, he just hauled it, you know, he drove for them. And we did that for about a year. And then we moved to Montgomery, Alabama. And he played baseball. He was a good amateur. Well, he played AA baseball. Got paid for that. And and then 6 years later, we moved back to East Newnan.
Now let's go back to, you talk about when your uncle, your husband, you told me, just want you to tell this story again, that after your husband got fired, you moved down with your uncle, and they ran whiskey, and they had to do it because, how did you feel, and want to tell how you felt about it, and when they moved to Montgomery, they still ran whiskey, okay?
Yeah, the uncle kept running it, but we moved. No, I didn't like it because that was just something I'd never lived in.
You want to start at the beginning and tell that story again, so we have it all together.
Well, we moved down, and he started, which we knew that was taking a chance, a terrible chance in any days that you do that. So he moved. I said, we just can't live in this, and we can't raise our child in this, you know. So that's what happened to us then. And but they would have, if I would have, they told me if my husband went to work before he moved, if he could find him a job, I could go back to work and work. And I said, no way am I going back in there. I said, he's a breadwinner, he's our, you know, I had to stay with him. I wasn't going to take a house somewhere and then go back there to work. They knew I was a good worker. And he was too, but he was strong-willed. And he thought, and it would have helped, but and there's a lot of sympathizers that would have gone, but they were just, for their own security, they were just afraid to, and it paid them to stay, I guess. Oh, for God's sake. What is it? You ready?
Okay, tell us what kind of person you were in the mill.
All right, now that's a better story, because I can't remember a lot of things. But anyway, I never, you know, a lot of people, I don't know what they called them in those days, but they would tell on you know, if they saw one doing something, they'd report it to Mr. Wood or to any of them. And, but I never did. And I just thought it was, I forget what they call it. No, they didn't call them tattletales. That ain't what I called them anyway, but anyway. But I never seen, they would get in with the boss. I mean, they'd play up to the boss, but I didn't do that. I didn't have to do that, and I thought it was so common for them to do it. And I said, no, I'll take care of myself, you know. And I can't say a thing against textile work because I was good. I was a good worker. I knew what I was doing, and I took every advantage of my ability to do what I was doing. And as far as chasing them around or something like that, I never had it. And I hadn't got anything bad to say about them. And we made a good living as any working people. In those days, there wasn't nothing to do but work in textile or farm. And my husband certainly wasn't a farmer. And it was, as far as the environment and the mill, me going to work and being mistreated, I wasn't.
Could you talk to me about what kind of a man your husband was?
My husband was, he wasn't, he was a good moral man, but he wasn't he didn't want a boss. He didn't want a boss. And I'd tell him all the time, the boss has got a boss, you know, and he'd bring his job home with him, and I never did that. I said, that'll be there in the morning when you go back. Forget it when you get home. I don't want to hear it. And he'd just quit if he thought somebody was trying to push him around, and when actually they wasn't. He just didn't want a boss. And you got to have one. But I didn't have any trouble being bossed because I did my job. And I think he did a good job, but he was just stubborn, I guess you'd say.
Well, what attracted him to the Union?
Well, he was always attracted to the Union. He wanted the Union in the South. He would have loved to seen it all over the South. And he would have worked for it, and he would have been a good leader of it. But they just wasn't going to have it, and I knew they wasn't going to have it. Now, I would have gone with him with any way it went, but he just didn't want me with the group that was doing that. That was not out with a stick or something, you know, and some women did, but I didn't. I didn't go to work when all that was going on. I stayed home. And I always spoke up for it. And no, they never asked me about it, you know. They never said, are you interested in that or anything. I could have worked on if I would and let him go.
Could you tell us about what they promised in the Union, how they recruited, and about the literature?
Now, I just know they'd pass out the literature. I didn't go to the meetings, but he would tell me what it was, the promising things, but he had mind enough. He was smart enough to know what it'd do if he could organize it, and he was just so brazen about it. He didn't try to sneak around like the rest of them. He went out and he'd pass that literature when he knew darn well what he was going to do.
Now, when did he get fired?
He got fired he got fired before the strike, before it started, and we were there when it was going on, and it was so much confusion, and it was kind of dangerous to get out, you know, and they finally called the National Guards and all that in and hauled those people off, and it wasn't that I was against the Union, not at all, and I could see it like he did. But I could not. He just didn't want me to go out into it. I couldn't have gone out there. If I'd have got out there, and it just wasn't a place for me. And that's the way I feel about it.
Now, why didn't he get arrested?
Do you know, to this day, I don't know why, because he was in there with them.
I don't know why he got arrested.
You want why he did not get arrested? I don't know. He was there. And my stepfather was there. He was working at East Newnan at that time. And as far as his daddy, Papa Bowie, he was for it, but he wasn't brazen about it like. But that wasn't the reason they fired him. But they fired my husband on account of going to the meetings. They didn't give him a chance to. But he was there, but he wasn't carrying a stick and all that stuff. But he was there at the round in the crowd, and I don't know why they didn't.
Now you've got a story about, let's see, there's a story about the baseball, your husband playing baseball for the team. Could you explain about the Mills paying baseball players?
Yes, he went to Montgomery. He played AA baseball. He was a good amateur baseball. That wasn't professional. And we moved to Montgomery, to West Boylston, and they paid him to play ball. And he took care of our child and played baseball. And then they came after us to come back to Noonan, and his mother and daddy, and we moved away to Hogansville. We went first to his uncle's, and then we moved to Montgomery. We came back to Noonan 6 years later. And then they they wanted him to come out to Sargent, Georgia, to play ball. And we moved everything back. We came back to Noonan, out to Sargent. And he was playing ball with them. And Bobby Lee, and he's still here till this day, he was the superintendent of the Mills. And because they went over his head and hired my husband to come back, he fired my husband. He said, no, they didn't, he wasn't going to pay nobody to play baseball, and they should have asked him. And so they fired him, and they told me I could work on. Well, I worked about 2 weeks, and I came out, and my husband and his brother were sitting, they lived right in front of the plant. And they were sitting over there with their feet propped up on the banister. And my job was a mess when I went in this morning. And I hated Sargent. I hated it. And I had started my daughter to school in the first grade. Second grade. And I said, I'm not letting her go to school there, and I'm not going to straighten out this mess and this job. And I just pushed the frames off that I was running and went over and told the boss I had quit. He said, you know you can't quit and Jess fired. I said, I have quit and I'm going out of here. And he followed me to the gate. And he said, I'm not unlocking this gate. I said, if you don't unlock this gate, I'm going to climb over this fence because I'm getting out of here. And my husband and his brother were sitting on the porch, and he saw the confusion, and he knew it was me. And so Harb, the man, his name was Harb Grizzard, and he called my husband. I said, I wish he would tell me to go back in there. I'd quit him a lot quicker than I'm quitting this place. So my husband crossed the street, and he said, what's the matter, honey? I said, this damn fool won't let me out of this gate. You would not get that. And he said, you better let her out of there. She's quitting, let her out of there. So they let me out the gate. And I walked right out of that gate. And that very afternoon, we drove down to East Noonan, and I had a sister live there. And I went in to see her. She was working, and I went in to see her. And Mr. Boggs, everybody hated him. He was a Scrooge, but I liked him. And I will tell you the reason. But he came up and he said, why in the world where do you live in now? I said, well, we do move around a lot, don't. And I said, I just quit the job out at Sargent. We've been out there 2 weeks. He said, do you want to go to work? I said, I'd be delighted. And he said, you come in the morning and go to work. And I went to work in there. And they were starting up the first looms at East Noonan. And he said, we will put Jess to work. That was my husband. And he started up the first looms there. Well, we worked there. And I don't know, I'd say 2 years, a year and a half. And he did have a boss that was, I don't know, bosses used to take advantage of me. And they did some women. I've seen them crying like a baby. I never cried in there in my life. I would just stand up and tell them, and they never sent me home. And I didn't care if they did, because I was just full grown too. And so we moved, he quit and went to Hogansville and went to work. And they generally just fire the wife. If a husband quits, you are just automatically off. But they didn't me. I worked 6 weeks. And my husband was in Hogansville, and he'd come home weekend. And so on Friday, he'd been gone 6 weeks, and they paid us off on Friday evening. And so the boss told me, Harper, he said, Florine, I don't have your money. I said, why? He said, I don't know why it's not here. And he was a second man. He wasn't the main boss. And but he said, I'll bring it to your house in the morning. And my husband came home on Friday nights, and I told him, and he was so mad he didn't know what to do. So Harper came to our house, and but in the meantime, Mr. Boggs, he told me, he came over and told me, and honestly, tears ran down his cheek. And he said, Florine, they're going to make me let you go. But said, if you will move off of the village, you can work on it as long as you want to. And I said, well, Mr. Boggs, I'm just not going to do that. I said, I'm not going to do it. I said, if I can't live there, I'm certainly not going to work here. And so the next morning, this Mr. Burks came to our house, and he said, Florine, they kept your money because you're still in this house. And my husband blew his stack. He went to the office, and there wasn't anybody there on Saturday morning, but they gathered in. He went up there, and he told them that he wanted my money, that she's not responsible for that house, and you're just not going to not pay her for a week's work. And they gave it to him. And then I just quit. And he was working in Hogansville, so I went down. Our daughter and me, I'd say she was in the 4th grade at school, and we went down and spent the weekend with him. And I decided I'd see if I could go to work, so they gave me a job. I went in to the personnel man, and he gave me a job. And I worked one night, and they told me, they called it the hobo job or something, and said nobody could run it. Well, I worked on a second shift, went to work at 3 in the afternoon to 11, and I run that job that night and just sit around. And so the next day, the overseer, he came over. I was looking out the window, and he came over there, and he said, Miss Bowie, where did you work last? And I said, East Newton. He said, surely you're not from East Newton. Said, I've never had a person from East Newton could do a thing with any of the jobs. I said, well, that's where I'm from. And he asked me how I liked the job, and I said, the job's fine. But I said, they moved me in 2 rooms, and I got a daughter, and I can't bring her home, and I'm not staying anywhere I can't bring her home. I said, we can't live in 2 rooms. And I said, when I came to work this afternoon, I saw a house being emptied, 19 Green Street in Hogansville. And I said, if I could get that house, I might, 3 rooms, and I might be interested. And he said, Lord said, there's so many people that lives off the village and drives in. I'm just afraid I couldn't do that. And I said, well, I'll work the rest of the week. And the next afternoon, the personnel man came down where I was working. He came down the alley. He said, Miss Bowie? I said, they tell me you're not going to stay with us if you don't get a house. I said, that's true. He said, well, you can have it any time you want it. And I moved into that house and brought my daughter home, put her in school.